Man, I'm starting to think that consciousness is an illusion and that it is a physical experience of our brain and synapses and things going on, and it's not outside. It is purely encompassed in our brain, and it's a physical thing.
Phil Phails at Philosophy.
And I'll tell you why, but I'll let you respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to tell you why?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been researching and discovered a bunch of examples of where human beings experienced brain injuries.
Uh-huh.
And then their personality took a left turn, a drastic change.
Right.
One example is this guy, Gage. Have you heard of the Gage?
Mm-mm.
This guy it was back in the day, he was working on a railroad team of people making the railroads. And part of that was using explosives. He was the leader, like the manager or the director of this whole team of people that were making this railroad track. If I'm wrong about any of this, please leave it in the comments or email me if you're watching this on TV. Let me know what I'm wrong about. That'd be nice to hear. But he was tapping down some explosive and it went off prematurely, and the thing that he was using went through his brain.
Mm-hmm.
He got up from that experience. He lived through it.
Mm-hmm.
He actually, it wasn't seemingly that catastrophic. It wasn't like they took him to the doctor and they repaired him. But after that experience, he was never the same human being again. He was irresponsible. He was an addict. He drank. He cussed. He couldn't hold down a job. His character, his personality was forever changed by that experience. And they looked at like where it interrupted in the brain. I don't remember right now. I want to say like the prefrontal cortex, but they seem to be able to map that to some of these like impulse control and some of these things. And then I think, well, ADHD folks have challenges with impulse and they map that to certain things occurring in the brain. And then I saw other examples of people falling off of motorcycles or something and having brain injuries, and then their character just changing and them not being able to hold everything together. And so the only thing that I can come up with beyond that's where we live, that's where consciousness is that somehow the I/O, the input output of our peripherals, like if our sensory input and output is somehow disrupted, and the data sets we're getting from the external world change in such a way that changes our character. Or the brain changes and it changes our character and all that stuff is the same, or both. But it's all physical things. Rebut.
Why? What if you're right? Why should I rebut?
Well, but because that's what we're here to do, Brand.
So, all right. So I think this actually directly...
Well, you don't have to rebut. You
No, I think this directly relates to this chapter because, yes, there's all these cases that we can find of people who undergo some sort of traumatic brain injury, right? And seem to have a fundamental shift in who they are. Or even if you don't have that deep personality shift, a fundamental shift in the experience of the world. I mean, and let's just even back up. We don't have to go into this sort of like, you're a different person, you're irresponsible, like that. I mean, that, I think as an observer, when we see that, because there's this sense that like, oh, I know Phil. You've got a certain level of character that is you. And then something happens to you and I come back and you're a different person, right? Like all the things that I know about you, all the things I can predict about how you'll respond to stuff seems to have shifted around this material shift, right? There's two things I think about that are kind of related analogies to what's going on in that. One is someone experiencing a fundamental physical shift in the way they experience the world that doesn't necessarily kind of immediately create that personality shift, but nevertheless, when you think about it, they're having a fundamentally different experience of consciousness. Let's say one day you're working, big explosion, doesn't go through your head, but it blinds you.
It's a traumatic
Right,
experience. Yeah.
right. But the result is that you're blinded,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, like you've lost your sight.
There's a shift in, yeah.
You fundamentally experiencing the world different now.
Right.
And there's a way in which your experience of consciousness is now, completely in a different framework. That seems to be maybe that input output
Yeah, yeah.
framework you're looking at.
But
So,
I thought,
but-
take that a step further. You don't even have to be blinded. Now I live in a world where bombs can go off and I experience them. I've lived in a bomb-free world for 46 years.
Yes.
Just the awareness that, oh, these aren't just in books.
Right.
These aren't just on the battlefield. This is a part of my subjective experience. That could change me.
Right. That can change you. So there's a level in which I think whatever's going on with consciousness, the idea that it is some sort of disembodied thing out here,
vapor out here, yeah,
that somehow then interacts through, like Descartes' idea was the pituitary gland. I mean, that becomes the problem.
There's some remote control,
right? That there's this sort of like, and that doesn't seem to work, right? That doesn't seem to work, right? Now, I don't think that gives us warrant to embrace materialism as the explanation, right? Because the problem with materialism is precisely, I think Chalmers is right. Like, it doesn't explain consciousness. Like, when we go into that kind of neurological explanation, there's nothing about that helps me understand what it is to experience what it is to be me in this body.
Yeah.
And I think when he talks about language in this chapter, right? Remember when he talks about saying that there's no speaker. How does that relate to saying, wouldn't it follow that there's no speech, right? Like, if there's no you to speak, then there would be no speech. But we experience speech and we experience language, and the fundamental thing we have to have is a sense that there's a you that has something to say in order to have even a concept of meaning, to engage in the decoding of speech and the hearing of you. So there's just all these aspects of my experience of the world that don't make sense if we use that materialist model, or if we use determinism as a model. And yet, these models work so effectively, especially in third-person analysis of the world. They do excellent work helping me kind of understand what's going on outside of myself and make predictions about how those things out in the world are going to flow around me. But they don't help me figure out something as simple as, should I put my glasses on or not? Right? Should I say hi to Phil this morning? Like all those things that we're confronted with about how to just operate as a human being. It's insufficient for that. And I think what's happening here is that we're really good at generating sophisticated, coherent, analytic frameworks to decipher our experience and organize it in a way that makes sense to us.
Right.
Now, the problem is, like, our sophisticated analytic frameworks that exist to help us make sense of the world don't really help us understand why we're the kind of thing that has sophisticated analytic frameworks that make sense of the world.